So great, thank you. So just to, first of all, to introduce ourselves, some of you know me already. My name is Francesca. I work for the University of Edinburgh as the Mathematics Outreach Coordinator. I'm originally Italian. Before my job, I was doing research in maths and in particular in geometry. And then for many reasons, I decided to go into math communication. As a personal note about myself, apart from math, as a good Italian, I really love cooking. So whenever I can, I try and do plan and design workshops that talk about math and cooking. Ben?
Hi, I'm Ben Goddard. I'm a reader in applied maths at Edinburgh. Since we're doing where you're originally from, I'm originally from Birmingham. And I've been doing maths outreach, public engagement, whatever you want to call it, for about 15 years. And one of my many hats at work is one of the organisers of MathsCircles.
Hi everyone, I'm Mary. I am a third-year undergraduate maths student at the University of Edinburgh, but I'm originally from Belfast in Northern Ireland, which is where I'm currently stuck due to lockdown rules. Last summer, I spent about 10 weeks working with Francesca and the rest of the outreach team as an intern. A big part of my role there was turning events into a virtual format because we figured we'd have to do them like that for quite a while. So that has led me on to being one of the organisers of MathsCircles as well.
Hello, I'm Jana Culmora. I'm originally from London, but my family's from Brazil. Currently, I am thankfully in Scotland, pursuing my undergraduate studies. I am a final year computer science and mathematics student, so I'm doing joint honours with the School of Informatics and Mathematics. And I've been involved with the maths outreach team since like the summer of 2020 when things started to be online. I've just sort of been a little gremlin who's helped out where she can, may it be presenting problems in MathsCircles or helping in the back end organization of said events. But yeah, that's me.
All right, so thank you all for joining us today. And as you can see from the title, we'll tell you a bit more about one of our most successful outreach activities at the University of Edinburgh, which is our MathsCircles, now our, well, virtual MathsCircles. Just to know something about your background, we've got a few questions for you. So the first, mainly to understand where you are coming from. So the first question is whether you are a primary school teacher or a secondary school teacher. If we could launch the poll, please. Oh, sharing screen, I can't really see when the results are here.
It's about in and it's about even, Francesca. It's about 50-50 primary, secondary. Great,
thank you. And then second question is whether you've been to one of our either our MathsCircles or one of our teacher workshops before.
And that one is a lot of no's and a couple of yeses, but a lot of no's.
That's good. So for the yeses, don't worry because we will expand on that. And for the no's, don't worry because we won't take anything for granted. So that's good. And then the third question and last one is whether you have used Enrich before in your classroom.
Okay, that's about 2/3 have sometimes used it and sort of even-ish between often and never.
Okay, good. Yeah, as I said, that's for us to understand your background. However, it doesn't really matter whether you are a primary or a secondary school teacher. Hopefully no one will feel excluded, because we are not going to talk about specific math, or I mean, we are, but what's important is the approach to the question, rather than the math question itself. So again, we sent some, oh, sorry, my screen is stuck. Here, that's history repeating. If you've been to the plenary session, just give me, oh, okay. Let me stop and reshare. Okay. Right, let me reshare now. Okay, so that was the introduction. We have sent some pre-recordings. However, just in case you didn't have time to watch it, we are gonna give just a very brief recap. So we talked about our MathsCircles, which is one of our University of Edinburgh's most successful outreach activities. They are basically math clubs aimed at 5 to 16 years old and their families. Pre-COVID, they used to be face-to-face at the University of Edinburgh, and children used to come to university with their family, have a go at a range of mathematical activities, and staff and students from the university were there to give a hand and guide visitors. But the idea was that children would work on the problems with their family at their own pace, and we were just there to support. Now, obviously, we can't do that face-to-face anymore, and they are virtual. Both face-to-face and virtual MathsCircles have been really popular. Face-to-face had an average of about 250 people per event, while virtual had an average of about 120 children, plus the parents, per event. As for the problems and activities we use, most of them come from Enrich, and the problems are low threshold, high ceiling, in the sense that there's usually a basic question that everyone can at least try and have a go at, try and solve without feeling too much intimidated. And then there's always extension questions, which are for those who are more keen and for those who would like to go deeper. And so this offers a great opportunity for differentiations. Problems are aimed at helping children to develop mathematical thinking. So they do what a researcher mathematician would do, but at their level and with simpler maths. So they are encouraged to first explore the problem, then make their own conjectures, then when they think they found a solution, explain that to other people and convince other people that the solution they found is right. So for this reason, since we want to encourage mathematical thinking, the emphasis is not on getting the right answer, but is on the process getting the child to the answer. And for this reason, actually, some problems are open-ended or end up with open-ended questions. Other problems don't really have a single right answer. And for all of these reasons, our philosophy is never give the answer, but rather give hints and try and lead participants to the answer. I know that this sometimes it's easier said than done. And I should say from our experience, this was much easier when MathsCircles were face-to-face. It is a bit trickier now that it's virtual and it needs to be guided from us. However, even now that it's virtual, we try and interact with the audience and get the answer from them instead of just do a straight presentation and jumping up with the answer to the problem. Right, so I said MathsCircles were very popular. However, we did realize that some people may feel intimidated by the idea of visiting a university, or even worse, now that they are online, in a way the audience for online mathematics event is kind of self-selecting. So our goal is to spread out this initiative wider across Scotland and to attract more and more people, in particular attracting people from all kinds of socioeconomical backgrounds, and also attract not only children who are very keen on maths, but even children who don't think they like maths. And for this, we need your help. So what we are trying to do in order to reach our goals is run development workshops for teachers, but not only teachers, also community workers. So we run some workshops for library staff in Edinburgh, and we run some MathsCircles in local libraries, which had very positive feedback. Sharing our resources with schools and community. At the moment, we can share our resources virtually and send you a selection of puzzles in a PDF form. But when we are back to the office, there's a box of resources which is in my office, and we are very happy to post it to schools on demand. We've got some funding for that, to do that. We are very happy to visit schools. When it was possible, we visited schools in deprived areas in Edinburgh, and the resources went really well there. Now we can do this only virtually. However, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because this means that we can reach out to the most remote areas of Scotland. So if you would like to arrange a virtual visit from us, just get in touch. And this is still work in progress, but in order to attract children that don't think they like math, we are trying to start some interdisciplinary problem-solving clubs together with some colleagues from other disciplines. At the moment, what we are trying to do, we are working with some colleagues who work in linguistics and try and get some problems and some puzzles and approach them from the mathematical perspective and from the language perspective. So we'll keep you updated on that, because it's still work in progress. Now it is problem solving time. We are going to show you an example of a typical MathsCircle problem. So I'll hand it over to Ben, just to say the problem is not obvious, it is hard. So if you find it hard, don't worry, I also found it hard when I tried having a go with that. And the idea of having something not obvious is to put you a bit in the shoes of the children when they see a question that they don't know how to answer. Let me stop share so that Ben,
yeah, I can do it over the top of you, it's fine.
Screen.
Cool.
Okay,
thanks, Francesca, and thank you for saying the first thing I was going to say, which is great because it means I don't have to say it. So I'm just going to represent the problem in case people didn't see it, and then we'll have a chat about how you can think about solving it. So hopefully you can see a slide with a chessboard on. Somebody with a camera on, maybe nod. Cool, thanks. Okay, so this is a puzzle about swapping some knights on the chessboard. So it's a 3x3 board. It is actually on Enrich under another name. I didn't actually know that when I picked it. So I think it goes back to at least the 1500s. So it's a fairly long-standing puzzle. So you have two white knights, let's say, on the top of the board and two black knights on the bottom of the board. And the aim is to get that configuration of your board to this one, where you can only use the standard chess knights move. So if you don't know what they are, they're just the L-shaped moves. So for example, this white knight here on A3 could move 1 across and 2 down, or 2 across and 1 down. So it's just 2 in one direction, 1 in the other direction. Okay, so if anybody had a go at, so the questions I asked were, can you do it to start with? So that's not entirely obvious that you can. And then what's the smallest number of moves necessary? So the first interactive thing maybe in the chat is if you could, if you did have a go at it, you managed to solve it, could you put in the chat how many moves it took you? Or if you didn't solve it, put in no, or I didn't solve it or something. Excellent. That's at least one response. Okay, Laura said 8.
There's an
Cool.
8. There's someone who says 8.
Okay, so let's have a quick go at it. So one thing that's good about this for a math circle style puzzle is it's pretty low entry. As long as you know how to move a knight around, then you can at least start doing it. So the first thing I do is pick one of the knights and move it, right? So for example, I can go here. And then I could move one of the other ones. And I'm doing this in a particular way because I have to remember how to do it. But you can pick any knight and move any other one and see what happens. So one thing you probably shouldn't do is I've just moved this knight from the bottom right to the middle top. I probably shouldn't move it straight back, right? Because that's just a waste of 2 perfectly good moves. But what I could do, for example, is this, right? So I could move those 2 white knights and then this and then this. And I've now moved each of the knights once. So I've done 4 moves. And now I could move them each again, right? So this is another 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is the 8 moves that people were saying you can do it in. Sorry, I will be a second because it's decided it doesn't want to play nicely. So that's my 8 moves. In 8 moves, what I've managed to do is rotate the board by 90 degrees, right? So I had, let me go back, maybe. No, it's not going to let me do it because it's showing the screen. So I started here with the white knights on the bottom, and I ended up with the white knights on the side and the black knights on the side. So I've rotated the board 90 degrees. Now I could just do those exact same moves again, and I would rotate the board by another 90 degrees, which would end up going to the solution that I wanted. So I claim the fewest you can do it in is 16 moves. If anybody wants to tell me how to do it in 8 afterwards, that would be great. So this is a sort of, yeah, low entry puzzle, but then what we would try and get kids to do is think about how you can actually solve this in a systematic way. So one way of thinking about that, and this is by far from the only way of thinking about this puzzle, but this is one nice one that introduces some interesting areas maths, which you can then have lots of extension problems with, is thinking about where each of the knights can move to. So let's start with the one on A1. Then one place they can move is to C2. They can also move up here to B3, but let's just move to C2 to start with. And then when you're on C2, you can think about where you can move. And again, there's 2 squares you can move to, but let's pick one of them, for example, to A3 and so on. So from A3, I can move to B2. So this way or this way, because knights moves are nicely symmetric in some way. And you can keep doing that, right? And what you end up with is this slightly messy star shape. And this, in fact, shows you every possible move on the board. So if I'm in this square, for example, I can only move to C2 or B1. In particular, you can't ever hit the middle square. So that's actually a bit of a wasted square in some way. And then the question is, well, what does this actually tell you? And at this point, I'm not sure it does tell you very much at all. However, if you thought about joining these with bits of string, for example, rather than arrows on a screen, then what you could do is you could unfold this mess of string into something nicer. So for example, you may or may not be able to visualize this. Hopefully you can. So I've got these 2 arrows that go from A1 and C1 up to B3. And I can imagine flipping those down so they unfold from the rest of them. And I can do that with, there's essentially 4 triangles, and I can do that with all of them. And what this does, and you should maybe try it at home if you don't believe me, is it unfolds everything nicely into what is essentially a circle, or at least it's a loop. So you take this slightly messy diagram and you unfold it, and it ends up with this. So this is now where, if you're keen and you want to think about it a bit more, you can convince yourself that you need 16 moves to do it in. And let me explain the gist of it. So again, this is not something that I would expect anybody to pick up on the first run through or the first time you tell it them, but hopefully you will get the idea. So these red lines give you all the possible moves on this board. And what I want to do is get the black knights from A1 and C1 to A3 and B and C3. And they can only move along the red lines. So if you sit and think about it for a bit, you can probably convince yourself that what has to happen is that because the knights can't sit on the same square, so they can't pass each other, you have to keep them in the same order around the circle. So basically what you have to do is move each of the knights around the circle to one of the corresponding squares you want to get to. For example, I want A1 to go to A3 or C3. If I move it to A3, then everything's bunched up and stuck behind it, and none of the black knights can get to C3. So I have to move A1 these 4 spaces round to C3. And similarly with the rest, so for example, C1 has to go to A3 and so on. So I have to move each of the knights 4 times. And there's 4 knights, so I have to do 16 moves in total. If you can work out how to do it in 8, please do show me. But that's my sort of very quick demonstration of why the puzzle is fairly low entry, and also why there's quite a lot of deep maths in it. So this links to all sorts of things about graph theory and networks and all that sort of stuff if you wanted to have follow-up stuff for keen kids. We also tend to have a lot of follow-up questions for the MathsCircle problems. So I'm going to show you 2 more. And these are both classic problems. I couldn't find the original reference for this. I think it's possibly a similar age. So this is a very similar looking problem. So instead of having a 3x3 board with 4 knights in the corners, you've got well, 4 rows and 3 columns. I don't know which order we want to put the numbers in. 4x3 with 3 knights in the bottom and 3 knights in the top. And the challenge is exactly the same. It's to swap the 2 sets of knights. The strategy here is probably quite different. And here is a very, very classic maths problem, which is you have a chessboard and a single knight on it. And the red blobs here just show which squares you can move to from its current position. And the challenge is, can you move the knight in these moves to visit each square once and only once? And then an even more challenging question is, how many such knight tours are there? So that's a brief sort of intro to how we would talk about a math circle problem. Obviously, when we do it with the kids, it's much more interactive. And we have a lot longer to do it, but that was my very quick run through of the sort of reasoning for why we pick these problems. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, hopefully.
And also, just to say, if you found it a bit fast, if you were a bit intimidated by the problem, just to reassure you, when I tried, it took me a good 10 or 15 minutes to do it in 16 moves. So don't worry about that. And you can, if you want, you can try yourself later on, and you can use some counters or 2 different kinds of coins and move them around a piece of paper. Also, if we were doing it with kids, that wouldn't take 10 minutes. That would take, I would say, at least 30 minutes, because we would try and get them to do the moves. However, we are unfortunately limited in time today, and we want to leave some time for questions. Also, I would say a good question for children, if we were doing it with children, is once they are able to do it in a certain number of moves, can you do it in less? Why not? Or why yes? Or something like that. So always that kind of investigative approach. Also, as we said in the pre-recording, some of you may now sit there wondering, why should I use this problem in the classroom? How does it relate to maths? But as Ben was saying, there's much more math behind it than you may think. And first of all, it's nice because it's a very visual problem. And if you are in the classroom, children can touch things and move knights or counters around. So that's very nice. Also, it encourages you to think systematically, and it encourages you to first have a go and explore and make your own conjectures later, and then you need to convince other people that your solution is the right one. And then, as Ben was saying, you can always go deeper and deeper and have a go at slightly different problems and ask questions. What if I had a 3x4 chessboard, for example, or what if I had a 4x4 chessboard? So you can go as deep as you want with this kind of problem, or stop at the first question. That's also fine. If children just find the way to swap the knights, then that's still fine. And that's it took me 10 or 15 minutes. So it's a very good achievement. All right.
One thing in particular it does introduce, especially in the explanation, is the idea of reducing a problem to something you've already seen. So maths is very hierarchical. So once you've worked out how to rotate the board by 90 degrees, you've essentially done the problem because you just do it again. So there's this sort of sense of splitting the problem up into smaller bits.
Right, so first of all, we would like to have some questions from you. So it's over to you while I share my screen again. So if you have any questions, then please put them in the chat, or unmute yourselves and talk. Either way is perfect. And in particular, so you can ask any questions you'd like. However, we are very interested to know and to think together with you on how we can reach our goals to attract people who from many backgrounds, and also people who don't like maths. And so we've also got a few questions from you, which is, how can we reach these goals together? Do you have any suggestions? And can you suggest any way to reach to those who don't have a good internet connections or as many tech devices? If you would like, we are also very happy to talk about what worked in the past and what didn't work as well for us. Oh, there's so there's someone saying, yes. Yes, I think that would work very well as a lunch math club, or even as something. When it was face-to-face, we did it in some school as after-school activity for children and family. And at that point, we would choose activities that were very manipulative, where there were a lot of visual resources and a lot of things that children could touch and move around. So yeah, it does work well as a lunch club or after school. It can also, we've also used it in the class as a workshop during school hours, and still it worked very well because children were doing something different. So they were enjoying it. And when it was face-to-face, we would have a kind of a free structure. So there were problems spread around the room. We would never tell the children what the difficulty level of the problem was, and children could choose the problem to work on. And it was quite surprising that sometimes teachers would tell us that sometimes children who would say that they didn't like math, in some way managed to solve the harder problems. Yeah, we live in the Highlands. Okay, someone saying after school is troublesome as we are remote. Yeah, as I was saying, after school is an idea, but it also works as activities during the school hours. Does it work with a mix of ages? It depends. When we were doing it face-to-face, we were doing it with a mix of ages. So the way we were doing it, it was a huge room, and the room was in a way organized by age, and children would choose the problems they wanted to work on. Now that it's virtual, we narrowed down a bit. So we've got now a slot for 7 to 11 and a slot for 11 to 14, just to make sure that we target the activities at the right level.
So Alexandra asked, what didn't work for you? What would you never do again? Do you particularly want to hear about in-person or online or both? Maybe I will start with the online one since we're all online. So one of the things is, in class, cool. Okay, but great. Okay, so in class, so we use a lot of materials from Enrich. We find that they're quite wordy, so we need to cut them down a bit. There's some barrier as well as the maths barrier. There's some reading comprehension barrier, and kids just won't do puzzles that have, you know, a big wall of text in front of them. Something else which you may be far better at than we are is keeping track of the resources. It normally took us longer to clear up than it did to do the entirety of the rest of the math circle. So organization appears to be key. We have, you know, 100 problems out, and then bits and pieces go missing all over the place. And then the other thing that I think we've been quite good at, but I think is quite hard to do at the start, especially if you're doing it in a school environment, is to make it clear that it's good for people to try things, and then if they don't like it, they can move on. If they want to sit there for the entire time on one puzzle, that's also absolutely fine. I think there's maybe a bit of a precedence of trying to complete every problem, and that's not really the point of the ones that we do. So there's sort of trying to set the environment that it's different to being in a classroom, and you're not expected to get or even at any point to know the answer. Does anybody want to add anything to that? No.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Francesca.
No, you go.
I was going to move on to another question, but if you're going to add to that one, then.
Yeah, just to build up on the point of don't expect to know any answers. So sometimes when we did it live and when we did it with teachers, we felt that some of the teachers or library staff were a bit stressed by the fact that they didn't know the answer. And just to know that this is sometimes our stress as well. Sometimes because when it was live, when it was face-to-face, it was about 70 problems in a room. So we couldn't have read 70 problems before. And sometimes it was a matter of telling to the children, I don't know the answer. We're going to work this out together. And in a way that puts us in a more human position with respect to the children, because they may come to the university thinking that we have the answer to everything. And then they realize that we also are normal people who need to think before getting to an answer. Sorry, Mary.
So I'm not sure how to pronounce your name exactly. My Scottish pronunciation of Scottish names is not very good, but Sinead has commented about a 2-teacher school and needing the puzzles to work for a variety of ages. That's quite good with the Enrich puzzles. So they're kind of split up into age brackets on their website. So they're 5 to 7-year-olds and then 7 to 11-year-olds. So the maths that's kind of needed to enter into the puzzle should be accessible by all 5-year-olds and all 7-year-olds, like the lower bracket of the age. But then typically they can extend right up to the higher end. So everyone should be able to get access to the problem. And then they do work for the variety of ages that are specified. And then the next question, someone has asked how many problems would be presented in a session. So In terms of the in-person, there'd be quite a lot of problems around the room, and the children just kind of, it's a bit of a free structure. They can try as many or as little as they want, so they could spend the whole time on one and get really into it, or they could just kind of touch a little bit on all of them. It depends on how they would like to do it. But for the online version of the events, so as Francesca mentioned, we split them into a 7 to 11-year-old session and 11 to 14-year-old session. So that helps us aim the problems a bit better at the different age groups. So in advance, we send out 3 problems in kind of like a resource pack PDF. And they would be just the initial questions for each puzzle. On that PDF, we don't give all the extension ones. We just want them to get kind of started and get the idea of the puzzle. During the live session, then we would present those 2 puzzles in more depth. So we recap over the most basic questions, and then we push them to the harder ones as far as we can get in about 20 to 25 minutes. And then the 3rd puzzle that's in the resource pack, they should have been able to complete. It's a less open-ended. It's more of a got the answer or you haven't. And then the second half of the online sessions, we have 2 surprise puzzles. They can pick one or other of the puzzles they want to do, which is good because then everyone starts off on the same footing. It doesn't matter whether they've had time to do it or not in advance. So there's 4 looked at during the session, and typically the kids look at 2, so they can change between rooms if they want, but most of them they stay for the whole duration of the puzzle in the room.
So
Thanks.
something Mary said reminded me of something, another top tip of something not to do. So the enriched problems, as well as having an age range on them, have a difficulty level. Don't give the kids the difficulty level, because they'll only want to do the difficult ones. And in all fairness, I don't think the enriched difficulty scaling is that accurate. So there's a lot of problems on there that they have as 1 star that I think are really hard. It does also sort of link into, sorry, I might be skipping over a question, but one that it links into is talking about doing it as a parental engagement workshop. So that's one thing that works really well in the in-person math circles, is having parents there as well. The good thing about the problems is that a lot of them are very easy to explain, but they're actually quite hard to do. And it might well take you 15 minutes to do it. And this is notable even with, you know, because we do it at university, we get a lot of university staff coming along. So even people that work in the School of Maths take quite a while to do some of the puzzles, even though they presumably have quite a lot of math knowledge. So it's sort of a great leveler in terms of parents actually working with their kids at roughly the same speed and not knowing sort of the answer ahead of time. So they seem to work really well with that. We did find actually, and talking to people at Cambridge that run a similar thing, parents are worse at doing the reading part than the kids are, which is one reason you need to shorten the text on them.
Thanks, Ben and Mary. I can see another question. Do you do a lesson session where we explain different methods before approaching the problem? That's from Suzanne. No, usually we don't. We just present the problems. When it was face-to-face, just lay them out on tables, while when it's online, we just show the question and then just let them go. But they are, sometimes children are surprisingly good at them, and sometimes they can think of methods to solve them that I wouldn't have thought of, for example.
So someone suggested the Liverpool Fun Maths Roadshow, which is a great suggestion of resources. Edinburgh is also a hub for that. So yeah, we've got a lot of those.
Yeah. So
those sort of things are really good. One thing that is quite good for the online ones is to make sure that you use problems that don't require too much resources. So most things say, oh, you need counters or you need this. Basically, all of them can be done those style with bits of paper. So they're great. But if you need a specific, device, then obviously they're not fantastic ones to pick. But you might want to get one for your classroom.
Yeah. I would say with the Fun Maths Roadshow, yeah, it's great problems. One way I've seen it done, and where I can see some differences with the problems we use in MathsCircles is when I saw them done in the sense encourage children to do as many as they could in as little time as they could, and that would be a bit different than what we do in MathsCircles. So yeah, I think they are great problems the Math Fun Roadshow, but I would use them in a way where I don't ask children, where children don't feel like I need to do a lot of them, because in that way I get a reward, but where children want to go deep into the problem. But yeah, they are great problems, and we are one of the hubs for that. So if you would like them, then get in touch if you would like to use them. Oh, thanks, Jana. Yeah, we've got a feedback form, which we would really appreciate if you could fill it in, because that will help us evaluate this workshop.
And there was an interesting comment from Gary about using it with low attainers. So apparently it's very popular with them. That's something we'd be very interested in talking about, actually, is to see how to target it to as wide an audience as possible. So we're well aware that the stuff we do at the moment, especially the in-person stuff, is very not representative of the Scottish population, let's say. It's barely representative of the university staff, which is most of the people that come at some points. If there's any questions or points we haven't answered, do you want to just maybe stick them in the chat again, because I've lost it all in the long scrolling. Yeah. Otherwise, if anybody has any suggestions for any of these points that we're interested in or would like to chat more about it, please do let us know. Maybe we can just do a quick informal poll in the chat of if people would be interested in running a math circle, either as a lunchtime club or an after school activity or parental engagement, or whatever you think would work best for you.
We got some yes. Few yes. Also, just to say, if you would like to have a look, so today we just explored one problem quite quickly. However, we do have some more teacher workshops planned where we go a bit more in depth over usually 3 problems. So if you want, I'll give you the website and links later on. Something that we are also trying to work on, if you know of any community groups, so not necessarily schools. So this, as I said, this kind of activities worked very well also in libraries, and there people wouldn't necessarily expect math activities, and the feedback was surprisingly good. So we are very keen to run it in unexpected places. It can be libraries, it can be community rooms. If you've got any idea of any group who would be happy to do something like that, put them in touch with us.
Yeah, we're also very happy to help organize after school clubs. It's the sort of thing that should work really well there, we think. Yeah.
And something we can do even more easily now that things are virtual, we are happy to run staff training, or well, more than training, but call them development workshops. So if you think of anyone in your school, any colleagues that would be happy to hear more about it, we are happy to organize a workshop for your school. Yeah. Yeah, intimidated by problem solving. I think it's Estelle. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. Don't worry, you're not the first one. And yeah, we've seen many people who are a bit intimidated by problem solving. And in a way, there's this kind of association of math with having to get the right answer straight away. So yeah, that's not atypical. So yeah, we are very happy to support you. And as I said, I think with problem solving, maybe because they don't have this kind of stress to get to the right answer, but in some of the workshops, we found that children are much quicker than adults at solving some of the problems, which is quite surprising. Just because they're not intimidated by the idea of just having a go and exploring. Also, just to say, oh, I think we are almost reaching the end. So I'll show the slide with our contacts. Oh, which is, I need to stop share and reshare. But yeah, so this is, as I was saying, if you're interested to see a math circle in action, then there's going to be one on the 20th of March. Booking page not yet available, but it will be soon on the web page. There's also a teacher development workshop planned for the 25th of March, where we will explore a couple of problems more in depth. You can also find, upcoming events are advertised on our website, which is this website. Well, will be advertised next week, let's say. It's not, the website is not yet up to date, but it will be next week. There's also, if you want to have a look at the resource pack we sent, there's 4 more problems from Enrich with some suggestions on how to approach them in the classroom. Also, I don't know why my screen is always stuck. If you want to get in touch, these are our contacts. You can, to be notified about upcoming events, the easiest way is to join our mailing list. And there's an option. If you fill in the feedback survey, that will give you the option. And don't worry, we will not try and link and use your email to identify you. So don't worry about that at all. If you want to get in touch, these are our email addresses. So this is monitored by all of us. Well, this is my personal email address, and this is our website.
And Laura asked about events after school hours. We are happy to run events, within reason, anytime that is most convenient for teachers. So if there are particular times that would be good, if you want to let us know, that's great. We can run them. We've typically been running them sort of early evening, but we realize that's bad for people with kids. So whatever works for most people, we're happy to do. So if you just get in touch and let us know when would be good for you, we're happy to do that.
Okay, so aware of the time. Thank you very much for that. Is there anything you want to say to finish up, or are you happy with that? Those contact emails, and I see you put them in the chat as well, so that everyone can access them rather than remembering them or writing them down, although I have written down.
Yeah. So just a couple of things. On our outreach website, there's also some online resources that we have produced over time. So just have a look at those if you want and see if they can be useful. And last thing, don't hesitate to get in touch if you think you would like us to visit your school.
And thanks to Rachel and Cam for hosting, so we didn't have to do that.
Oh yeah, that's true. Thank you so much.